Hello here, and welcome again to another edition of the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett taking you here for the next hour as we make our way through the dog days of February, as we are in that kind of dead period of college basketball, preparing for conference tournaments. No football other than the Super Bowl, obviously, this weekend. But here we are. A lot still going on, guys. And I wanted to lead off the show. NFL Combine invites out. Nebraska gets 3. No real surprise. Trey Palmer in the Combine. I would say Travis Vokalek, not a surprise either in the Combine from just the amount of scout attention he received in the last year. But you have O'Shawn Mathis in the Combine, and I'm not surprised. I'll get your opinion on that. But just based on the Senior Bowl praise and things that he was getting during the year. But the one real snub, Garrett Nelson, not in the Combine. Caleb Tanner, not in the Combine either. But I think the Garrett Nelson snub of the Combine does get your attention because this is a guy that could have come back for not a 6th year, but it would have been a 5th year at Nebraska.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd even call it a snub. I don't think, you know what? I don't know if Garrett Nelson would call it a snub. I talked to Garrett in December. Was it December, early January? And he wasn't counting on an invite. He wanted an invite. He was hoping he'd get an invite, but it was not. He didn't regard it as a slam dunk. Now, he was a second-team All-Big Ten player. He's probably right on the edge. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have the measurables like that some guys might have. Like O'Shawn's got measurables. O'Shawn's long arms, linear, has that look. Garrett doesn't really. Hey, and listen, guys, a lot of the Combine invites, a lot of it is measurables. Not all of it, but a lot of it is measurables. His production, 5.5 sacks. Okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's more than O'Shawn. O'Shawn had 3.5 sacks. Garrett had a lot more tackles, 55 tackles. O'Shawn wasn't nearly that productive. But again, O'Shawn had measurables, and Trey Palmer was a no-brainer with what, 71 catches for 1,049 yards. No-brainer.
Yeah. And Vokalek's a no-brainer as a premium position.
Ooh, no-brainer. Are you putting no-brainer on Vokalek, Rob?
Just with his frame.
Really?
I mean, he's got that prototype NFL body. I mean, his wingspan is enormous.
Yeah,
he's huge.
Measurables.
And he actually had some production. I mean,
20 catches.
Finally caught his first touchdown as a Husker last year. And so, I mean, like, there was at least something there where you could see what he could bring on the field, whereas before he was always backing up Austin Allen or he was hurt. So, not a surprise at all with any of those 3 that got invites. The biggest surprise for me about Nelson was just not only that he didn't get an invite, but that he didn't get an invite after what he did in the All-Star game, where he was getting all that praise. Yeah. They were talking about him as, one of the more impressive players during those practices with his energy and all that sort of stuff. So maybe like he's the type of guy that isn't going to, even if he's not going to get that chance in the Combine, I don't think that's like slams the door on his NFL potential. He's the guy that's going to get individual meetings and workouts, and with his personality and just talking with him, he's going to impress some people. And so you pair the way that he got better last year and then obviously this past season with just how impressive he is as a person and as a leader, I think he's going to at least have a chance to be a back-end guy.
And remember this, Divino Zigbo, Stanley Morgan, Luke Gifford, Jack Stahl, they did not get Combine invites.
Good point, Sean.
They're on all active rosters right now. Now, Matt Farniak was a Combine invite, I believe.
With JoJo?
JoJo did get a Combine invite.
Okay.
He did, but he was not drafted, which really surprised folks because of how well he played in the Senior Bowl. I think what actually hurt JoJo was he couldn't really play in the box very well, and people didn't know for sure if he could play in space, but he's proven to be an outstanding special teams player. He scored a touchdown on special teams this year.
And he was active all year. He was on the Colts active roster all year. I wonder, the last thing I'd say, I wonder about Vokalek if anybody would ask him to try tackle, just at least try it.
Oh, it would. No.
Why? Why, Sean?
A lot of weight.
That's a lot of weight. He's already pretty grown man at this point. I mean, I don't know if you see tight end. Maybe.
Well, you could put 20 pounds on him. I mean, that and then he's a tackle.
But I'm just going solely off Pro Football Focus, and I know some people have their opinions on that, but he never had like elite block numbers on Pro Football Focus that would lead you to believe.
Now hold on. They said there was guys that said over there he was the best blocker on the team.
Maybe best edge blocker.
Yeah. Well, that's what you do at tackle.
Right.
But he's never stayed in pass pro.
He's listed as 260. You think you're gonna have a 280-pound tackle in the NFL?
Put 30 pounds on.
30 pounds on a 24, 25-year-old guy?
35.
That's already at the peak of his development.
I'm just saying.
Peak.
I think that there's enough to work with there. People are going to like him at tight end.
Okay.
And I mean, like, if Jack Stoll can get significant playing time, Travis Vokolek can get significant playing time.
And Caleb Tanner, no combine invite, but he'll get a great look at pro day. That's not a surprise. I mean, Caleb Tanner.
Oh, God, I could see him making it, Caleb.
I
could.
Can he cover kicks and punts, though? Yeah, because that's the key. You look at the NFL, like Alonzo, the receiver, Alonzo Moore, and then Brandon Riley, they both made the NFL because they could run and cover kicks and punts. Jordan Westerkamp, who you would think had the better college career and was going to be he never made the pros because he was not built to play specials.
You know who's built to play specials? Caleb Tanner. Why wouldn't he be able to?
How much experience does he have doing it, though?
Well, I don't know, but I bet he'll do it if they asked him to do it for $1 million a year.
He better, because that's his way.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not going to get just being a defender. Like, he's got to be able to do everything if he's going to make a roster spot.
He never missed a game in Nebraska. He'll do what's asked of him. I mean,
Trey Palmer, though, he'll test so well at the combine.
Oh, man, he's going to kill the 40.
Like, he will run one of the fastest combine 40s. And my prediction is at the pro day, he'll just kind of run some routes. Like, he's not going to probably have to do much at pro day. A lot of these guys, that's been the trend.
Yeah.
You know, generally the combine is all you need, because let's face it, pro day times are always better than the combine times. The combine's what matters, because you're in the same place with all the guys on the same timing method on the same surface, where pro days can vary. In fact, Nebraska had, at least they had it before, run their own official watch. Every scout runs their own watch. And then we'd go to Kenny Wilhite and get kind of the consensus time based on all the scout times. Like, there was never like a true time Nebraska would share from those pro days.
You know, I'll tell you what, there's a little pressure on him to run fast. I mean,
that's his thing.
4.3s for sure, but could he hit high 4.2s? That's what I'm intrigued. I think he will for sure run 4.3s. Like, if he doesn't run 4.3s, I will be shocked.
Well, I mean, there's a little heat on him. That's his forte. He's
a national level sprinter type guy. Like, this is no new thing for him.
Louisiana state champion.
Yeah, he'll whip off.
He's going to thrive in that environment.
All right, other opening headline I want to cover here in segment 1. Coaching contracts have been now finalized for Nebraska. We learned Bob Wager's salary. It's $315,000. That means Matt Rule's 10 assistant coaches will make $5.52 million. With strength coach Corey Campbell in there, they'll make $5.97 million. But the $5.52 million is almost $1.5 million less than what the allotted $7 million Rule was given. And we did get further confirmation on this from Nebraska that Corey Campbell does not count towards the $7 million, even though we were told one way it did. Now he doesn't. So Rule had a lot of additional money to play with. It tells me they're going to use a lot of that money on the other side of the staff, whether it's Dr. Susan Elza, Sean Patton, the support staff people. But what do you guys think of the final salary numbers?
Reflective of a young staff. I mean, this is what it is. Especially those guys at the bottom, Garrett McGuire at 285, and Garrett McGuire, not much experience at all. Rob Dvorak, not much experience at all. EJ Barthel's got some experience, but those guys, I mean, Rule has made it clear that he likes the idea of having a young, hungry staff. You don't have to pay those guys a lot of money, some of those guys, right?
It's almost like a military. You have the generals, the 2 coordinators, you have kind of like the lieutenants, the next line of coaches, then kind of like the foot soldiers. And those younger coaches, they're the foot soldiers going into like 15 high schools a day, doing exactly what they're told. You hire older veteran coaches. We've had this discussion before. A guy that's 57 years old, that's coached for 30 years, and you tell him to go into 15 schools.
Yeah. How's Mark Whipple going to handle that? You know, just for an example, like that type of coach.
Foley, though, will handle it.
Well, yeah, because
he's 55.
Foley understands and is in lockstep with Rule, probably as much as anybody on that staff. So that makes sense. And my takeaway too is I'm glad that they're spreading that pool of money, that significant pool of money, and beyond just the full-time staff, that they're finding new creative ways. Isn't it this already like one of the largest staffs, not just obviously coaching staffs, but like football staffs in the Big Ten?
Yes, it is one of the bigger
they're
ones.
Counting like
it's bigger than Ohio State.
I did a head count, and there's like 50 right now. If you count like a secretary and the coaches.
Yeah, that's informative. I mean, people do ask you sometimes, I mean, how big is that staff over there? Matt Rule, the head coach, essentially oversees a staff of 50 people.
And he brought in Matt Rule. Think about this. He made 40 of his own hires since taking over. And then he added 31 additional players. He kept 8 that were committed.
Okay.
So there's 39 total. So he made 31 player additions and 40 hires in 2 months.
71 new faces at Memorial Stadium
that he brought in himself.
It's pretty big. That's a big number. It's a big number. That's a lot for us to try to get to know.
Well, it's not just replacing people too. They're bringing in new positions. And so they're bolstering that entire staff from head coach down to secretary as much as you could expect.
Nutritionists, strength staff.
Yeah.
The key people that have stayed, as we've hit on before, Donovan Raiola as the O-line coach, Ron Brown, who has a new title with player outreach. He's no longer listed as an analyst. Those are the key people besides a couple of the recruiting people like Vince Ginta and Ryan Callahan.
Those are big names.
Those are big names.
Big names.
Even from the medical side, we've seen Dr. Lonnie Albers move on, trainer Mark Meyer move on from the program. So even from that side, there's been shakeup. A side that you normally wouldn't see maybe in the headlines, but they've gone from nutrition to strength to medical on some of the changes they've made in the program.
God, now that we're talking about this is we're talking about massive change.
And it's surprising, but it shouldn't necessarily be, just because this is kind of what Matt Rule does. Nebraska fans have been wanting a CEO. This is a definition of a guy that's literally putting his fingerprints on every level of this program, from top to the very bottom. And I guess that just the magnitude of it kind of takes you back a little bit, but it shouldn't be a total stunner that Matt Rule is going to this extent.
Sean, is it mostly reminiscent of Bill Callahan?
Yeah, because he brought in a lot of his own people too. But remember, they didn't have near the support staffs back then.
No, but just the CEO element of it.
No doubt. And I think what's different about Matt Rule is he's not afraid to, he's organized enough and detailed enough to bring in all his own people, where I feel like Frost, he's like, I'm just taking everybody with me. And Mike Riley, I feel like they get kind of guilted to keep some people that they're really not even sure about, that they just, and they keep them around. Rule's like, I'm not doing that. Like, I've done that. I've tried to do that at Carolina and it went terrible for me. And he told that to some of the coaches. He's like, hey, I know you're a good coach, or I know you're good at your job here in this program, but I got to get my own people here. So he's been pretty honest about that. Where we've never seen a complete, almost clean out like this in a long time.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question. I should know, you guys. Did Callahan call his own plays?
Yes.
Norvell wasn't calling those plays?
He was on the headset with Bill Callahan.
Right? Is that how you remember, Rob? I remember Bill with a play sheet.
Yeah. A huge play sheet.
Yeah.
And where things did kind of go bad in the 06 Cotton Bowl. Where
here comes the incredible memory.
They were struggling. Nebraska came out. I interviewed Will Muschamp after the game in Dallas.
Yeah.
And he said nobody had come at me the way Callahan did on those first scripted drives, like just sliced them up. And he goes, I adjusted though from man to zone. We hadn't shown zone all year. They didn't have an answer for it.
You know why? Because Zach's arm strength wasn't great
to get through the windows.
He had to get through those zone windows, and he's good on that man to man. It's a different game.
And that was an elite Auburn defense in Dallas that day. And they, so then after the game was over, what I had heard was Callahan and Norvell were at odds on how to go out of the zone.
Really?
And Callahan shut off the headset on Norvell during the game and just kind of took over. And that was Jay's last game at Nebraska.
I would expect it to be. When you get shut off the headset during a bowl game, that's your sign.
It was a 17-14 game.
That's your sign.
It's a close game.
And Nebraska was up 14-3.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't ask me how I remember these things. I don't know some of my cousins' names, but I remember these things.
That was beautiful, Sean.
Yeah. But you remember the important stuff. That's what matters.
Family first.
Sean, detail the 06 Cotton Bowl from the media gifts to the game, but I've got like 50 or 60 cousins, and I might not know all their names.
Shows up to family Christmas and says, hey, what's up, man? But he can remember exactly what happened on a 3rd and 11 in the 2006.
And my wife's the teacher, so she's really good at remembering all children's names.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's her name? what's his
Yep.
and show
Yeah.
like that's so and so. All right, when we come back, we're going to continue opening headlines. Brian Buschini is going to change numbers this year. We're going to talk about that and what he's doing next. You're listening to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett. Before we get into the news here, this segment of the program is brought to you by Tanner's Sports Bar and Grill. No better place to go in and watch the big game on Sunday, or get your food to go. Take it home. Get some wings, get some hot lips. That's Tanner's Sports Bar and Grill, 30th and Yankee Hill. I'm still trying to kind of iron out my Super Bowl plans, get things figured out. Thank goodness, Robin, there is no Nebraska basketball on Super Bowl Sundays. Sometimes they get a little aggressive on those TV windows and schedule Nebraska to play at like 1.
Yeah, they do. I mean, they're playing this Sunday, so it just worked out perfectly.
The Saturday. They're playing this Saturday, right?
No,
Saturday.
It was this past Sunday.
Yeah.
You're right. So it's past Sunday, and then it skipped. So we dodged a bullet. That was the first thing I always look at when those schedule releases come out is when's the Super Bowl and is Nebraska playing that day? Because they've done that before. Makes for a
I hope you get your
miserable
plans
day.
ironed out there, Sean.
I'll get it all figured out. Well, Tanner Sports Bar and Grill, 30th and Yankee Hill Road. Let's get into Dylan Raiola now.
Yes.
Obviously, we could basically do a Dylan Raiola segment every week on this show if we wanted to, but he announced to The Athletic, Mitch Sherman, our colleague and friend, was out in Arizona, did a great rundown and feature on Dylan Raiola and Dominic Raiola, and they confirmed to Mitch that they're coming to Nebraska on March 25th. They're going to visit Georgia on March 18th. They were at USC right before the dead period started on 2 weekends ago. So those appear to be the 3 teams really in the race right now. Doesn't it feel like Michigan or TCU is up there at this point?
Oregon. What about Oregon?
Oregon, maybe. But man, the Pac-12, just the future of that league is really, I think, a detriment to saying Oregon right now, because what is the Pac-12 going to be?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, it's a good point, Sean. I think you're exactly right about the teams. USC 3 months ago or 2 months ago, I wouldn't have had them in the hunt. They've made the most recent push, Lincoln Riley and USC. But I mean, Nebraska, as we know, is squarely in it. I don't know who'd be the favorite. I'm still sticking with Nebraska's got a 50% chance. I've gotten some pushback from some people on that, but they think it's too high. But I'm sticking with 50% chance. Georgia,
too, made a new 2024 QB offer this week.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to a couple of people tied to Georgia, and they said that Georgia is potentially looking at taking 2 quarterbacks this year.
Isn't that why Raiola left Ohio State? Because they kept recruiting quarterbacks?
I think it was – I don't think they liked the way Ohio State was recruiting him. It might have been – I mean, maybe it's tied to that. Hard to know exactly why.
Are any of those other schools going to prioritize Dylan Raiola like Nebraska will?
Oh, USC will for sure, and Georgia.
Well, I don't know. Will US? I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Like USC, I don't know.
He's the number 1 overall player in the country.
I get it, but they have Lincoln Riley, who basically just give him a quarterback, they're going to win the Heisman. So it's like, I don't know. I'm just. I
get where Rob's
just a question I'm throwing out.
I'd have to look at what else.
Whereas he's a legacy guy here, and like he's all fans are talking about. Like, I don't know. I just don't know if like the love he's going to get from Nebraska
no doubt.
compares to anywhere else he's considering. Yeah,
to anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, really, seriously.
I mean, somebody asked on the thread, what would the reaction be if he committed? And I found a GIF of like the Super Bowl parade in St. Louis.
Right. Now, and I don't mind saying this on the air.
That's what it'd be like.
Yeah, and I would say that would be a little uncomfortable. I mean, I'll be a little uncomfortable with the whole thing. It's so much for that kid. I mean,
A lot of pressure.
I know.
Remember how uncomfortable the Keyshawn Johnson Jebbia year was in Bookie?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can't. There's just no way around it, though. I mean, there's really no way around it. If he commits to Nebraska, it will be like Nebraska's already won a national championship.
Yeah. But I mean, part of it is kind of their own doing with the way they've gone about this recruitment. With his dad doing as many interviews and media tours as he's doing. So I mean, like, I don't think that they're like shying away from that attention. I think there's probably an element that they enjoy about that, and which is not just them. That's pretty standard.
I mean,
with high-level recruits.
Dom hasn't done a ton of media interviews. I mean, I think they're really good at just talking to like the 3 national writers from the major recruiting services just to keep them updated.
Which is good.
And us, and
then us, and then Mitch went out there though. Mitch
Yeah.
went out to Scott. I mean, so if you go to Scottsdale, they're going to give you.
Sure.
But I don't know. The other story with him is he switched high schools, so he'll be at his 3rd high school in 3 years. He went from Chandler to now Pinnacle, and before he played at Burleson in Texas. So 3 high schools, 3 years, and he'll be done at Pinnacle in December. And Pinnacle is the same high school that Spencer Rattler came from, which is who Marcus Satterfield coached last year at South Carolina.
And we're not expecting a spring commitment at this point, are we?
The feel I have now is like it could go into June. Like there could be the sentiment I'm hearing today is there could be another round of visits in June.
Okay.
Like officials. So like
Makes sense.
There's kind of like the pre-party, and then the official visits will be in June.
Makes sense.
And very few quarterbacks can wait that long, because the quarterback's the number one. Like Nebraska, that will be a tough position, because if they don't get him
in the spring,
and let's say and Daniel Kalen from Bellevue West, they could easily probably get him if they wanted to. But Daniel Kalen's going to be committed somewhere in the next month or 2.
It gets dicey, doesn't it? It gets dicey.
Do you think the other schools involved are going to be willing to wait it out? I mean, Georgia's already offering other quarterbacks.
Yes.
Is USC just going to sit and wait for Dylan to go through another round of visits?
I don't know, and I apologize for this. I don't know what else USC has. Are they recruiting somebody else for 2024? What do they got in 20? I mean, what are they?
I can't speak authoritatively. I just know when you're the number one player, just like you would be in basketball, you can call the shots.
Yes, yeah.
You can call the shots. Like, I don't think you could decide to commit a minute before signing.
They'll make room for you.
They figure it out. But yeah, the reaction of the other players in your program is what you wonder about. And speaking of other players in Nebraska's program, I wanted to transition to Brian Buschini. He made an announcement this week that he's going to switch his jersey number to number 18 to tribute the late Brooke Behringer. Very cool gesture by Buschini, and it just tells you the spirit of Brooke Behringer, how long it's stayed in this Nebraska program. And I think to an extent Sam Foltz is a similar type of player as well, but obviously Brooke will always be remembered. He's got a statue out in front of the stadium, and very cool gesture, Sip, that Brian Buschini will honor Brooke Behringer.
Yeah, a couple things. Buschini seems to genuinely love being here, so I wasn't surprised by this. I think he immerses himself in the culture here, is very respectful of the history, and they walk by, those guys walk by the players, the coaches, walk by that Tom Osborne, Brooke Behringer statue every single day, and I mean, so that it is in their minds at some level. And it's in his mind at a high level, and I have nothing but respect for that. But mostly, I just like Buschini from the moment he got here seemed to be a guy that appreciated Nebraska for what it is, everything that it is, which I really appreciate that.
It strikes me as a guy, too, that kind of gravitates to what Brooke Behringer stood for. You know, like just with what the person that he was and the way he went about his business, like, you know, it's hard to compare a quarterback to a punter, but you know, he's a grown up. I mean, you talk to him, he's
married with a home.
It's like a 35-year-old guy. I mean, so like, of all the players that I think would gravitate towards doing something like that, Brian Buschini would be at the top of the list for me.
You're listening here to the Husker Online Show, as we put a wrap on things, and then obviously winter conditioning going on as we speak. Been pretty quiet. The coaching staff, though, staying very busy doing clinics. They were on the road in Texas last weekend. Matt Rule was in the Dallas area. Dr. Susan Elza spoke in Houston. This week, the staff will speak in Omaha to the Omaha Metros Coaches Association, including head coach Matt Rule. So they're really, you can't have recruits on campus right now. You can't go see recruits off campus, but they're going out and still making an impact, I think, in the best ways they can.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, get the brand out there, keep it out there. And that's what Matt Rule's all about. He's really about that. He likes getting around. He embraces that part of the job.
That's what he said at his press conference. He's like, there's no time for days off. Like, we are at a full sprint, and I'm going to go to every single state, every single recruit, every single event, meet with any possible coach to continue to build the brand of Nebraska football, establish connections on the recruiting trail, and all that. There's no time to sit back and kick your feet up, and this is another example of that.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk Nebraska basketball. The Huskers got a much-needed big win on Sunday over Penn State. We'll get Robin's thoughts on that, and then this weekend's matchup at home. You're listening to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Robin Washett, Steve Sipple, talking Nebraska basketball. Over the weekend, the Huskers got a big, much-needed home win against a very quality Penn State team, 72-63. Keisei Tokunama had 30 points in that win for the Huskers. We're taping this on Wednesday before the Michigan game, so we really can't get into the Michigan game unless Robin is got like a crystal ball to see the future. But over the weekend, Robin, another winnable home game here at PBA, a coveted Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m., Phillips 66, Big 8 special.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get too many of those 3 p.m. Saturday games like the old days, Sip.
No.
Oh, that's kind of nice, Rob.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that that Penn State game was the first weekend Big Ten home game they'd had since Purdue, which was December 10th. So they went from December 10th to February 5th without having a Big Ten home game.
Jeez.
Yeah.
On a weekend.
That's what I'm saying. On a weekend.
And
yeah,
there was the Purdue game, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So
God.
now you get another one against a Wisconsin team that, like you said, you look at what's remaining on their schedule, you could make a very strong case that after Minnesota, this is the most winnable game left on the tap. The fact that it is a Saturday, the fact that it is at home, and Wisconsin's been up and down just like Nebraska has. In fact, if you look at the Ken Pom projections, they have Nebraska with an 82% chance of beating Minnesota at home, and then a 51% chance of beating Wisconsin. So they're technically predicting Nebraska to win that game, and those are the only two wins they have left.
And those three, that place will be full. Number one, Chucky Hepburn will bring people there too from Bellevue West. I don't know when Bellevue West plays Saturday, if they play Saturday or not, but that will be cool for his family and community of Bellevue West. But for people that come in from Kearney and Grand Island and around the state, Beatrice, wherever, that's a great time to get people to the arena, have lunch, go to the game. So I'm excited just for a great Saturday afternoon down here.
Well, you see just how much of a difference that makes. I mean, the Penn State, the crowd was a huge part in them winning that game. The Purdue game, which they almost won here, like a weekend game especially on a Saturday at PBA, that's a huge X factor for Nebraska, and they just don't get enough of them. Yeah. And so this is an opportunity. Again, we don't know what's going to happen at Michigan here, but there could be some momentum rolling into that game. And man, Nebraska fans are just so desperate for something to cling to and some positivity. If they can get something rolling into Saturday with that home game, that is certainly a winnable game for Nebraska. That, they've already surpassed any win total Fred Hoiberg has had since he's been here, and now everything else is icing on the cake, and the march to 500 continues.
Yeah, well, that would be interesting if they could do that. I've been impressed with the way they've held together. A lot of people talked about that Penn State game as being so important because if they lose it, they would go in the tank. I just didn't. I've never. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I haven't seen evidence of this team going in a tank.
No, I mean, even the games they're losing,
right?
Like they're the ones that get away from him at the end. Like Illinois, it was a tie game on the road at Illinois with 10 minutes left, and then they just kind of unraveled on them. Maryland, I mean, Sam Hoiberg comes off and has the game of his life, and they lose that game by 19.
They lost by 19,
but it was much closer than what the final. So, like, if you look at the final score, you're like, oh man, they're completely falling apart. They're not.
No, I don't see it. I don't see
that's
them.
A testament to this group and the leadership that they have within them. The Derek Walker, Sam Griesel, and even Vandamel and Gary.
They say too.
Yeah, I'm talking about like the vocal leaders, the ones that are like taking control in the huddle, in the locker room, and making guys bring it day to day. Like, I think that's a real example of the different culture this particular group has compared to previous ones. I mean, how many times when you go to a game and it's not the fact that you expect them to lose, you expect them to get housed. And while, again, some of these have been lopsided scores, if you watch the game, they're not quitting. This Nebraska group is not quitting. They're continuing to fight, and they're severely undermanned in some cases, especially against the higher ranked teams in the conference. But the effort is there, and I think there's something to be said for that, especially considering all the adversity that has hit this season.
It does come to mind though, and you have to give voice to this. I think is that team last year finished strong. It did.
Yeah, when it didn't matter.
Yeah, I know, but they did. They went to Wisconsin, beat a ranked team.
They did.
Beat Ohio State late. And they actually played well in the Big Ten, not real well in the Big Ten tournament, but they had a great chance to win that game.
Yeah, they won their last 3 in the regular season. They destroyed Penn State on the road on their senior night.
Okay.
And then they went to Ohio State, beat them by 8.
And then
they edged Wisconsin, all 3 straight road games. And then they go and lose Northwestern. By 10. And that was a game they were dominating the first half.
Right.
They were up big.
They had a chance to win it in the end.
But again, that was when they were already 7-21. So it's like
true.
The season was what it was. Really, all they were playing for was Bryce to try and win Freshman of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a little bit different in the sense that technically there's still a chance for something. If you want to talk about like postseason, I'm talking about NCAA tournament, like NIT or even anything lower than that. That is still, in theory, on the table. With the way that this season, when you have 4 out of your final 5 at home. You got Wisconsin, you got Minnesota, games that they're right now currently projected to win. They're a 2-point underdog against Michigan State, 4-point underdog against Maryland. So, I mean, like, it's within the realm of possibility that this thing could end on the highest note a season has ended under Fred Hoiberg, when games still actually matter in the context of the season.
And that's something we said for that. Now, I'm telling you guys, there are some people that are listening to this. They're saying, "Oh God, you guys are really gushing praise on a team."
I get that.
They were picked last in the league.
I get that a lot.
No, Sean, what I was going to say before you interrupted is that some people will, will say you're praising them just for playing hard. I mean, that's what it's come to. Just play hard, and the local media will be happy.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be a given, right? That they play hard,
but it hasn't been.
True.
And so if you want to look for signs of progress, that's you cannot deny that this group has brought those types of things far more than any other Fred Hoiberg team here.
So when you're picked 14th, though, in a 14-team league, what is a realistic context of what a successful season is? That is the debate that all of us will have.
That is it. Yeah. What is it?
And then the issue is you're being picked 14th and
playing
year 4.
Much better than what you're projected. That's my and they are playing better than what they were projected.
They are. Minnesota's clearly the worst team.
Yeah, Minnesota's bad.
Ohio State's having a horrible year.
Yeah, they fell apart.
Teams like 9 through 13, it's a sheet of paper that separates those.
Is it
teams.
though? In Minnesota? No, Minnesota's bad.
No, 14. They're 14.
Oh,
so I'm
okay.
saying teams like 9
through
through 13.
Yeah.
I feel like Nebraska is kind of
right there.
Nebraska's currently going into Michigan. They're a game out of being in 10th place.
Okay.
To get out of that.
So that means that's avoiding the play-in game.
The
first
Tuesday game.
Yeah. Wednesday night game, which that's the worst possible setting because you're in these like big NBA arenas. Like, so they'll be at the United Center.
No, it's in Minneapolis.
No, that's the women's in Minneapolis. They're in Minneapolis next year.
So the men are not in Minneapolis.
Yeah, so they're in Chicago this year, Minneapolis next year. Either way, you're playing these big NBA arenas. There's nobody there. Like, you get a handful of people from Nebraska, a handful of people from Minnesota, and it's just this empty, cavernous arena. There's hardly any other like media there, so like no buzz at all. And so to avoid playing in that, just from a morale standpoint, to get some, electricity a little bit,
that would be progress.
That would be progress.
Robin, you're the veteran of the Wednesday night game.
Oh yeah, I've covered a lot of those.
Like they played Indiana one year on the Wednesday night game, right? And it was like completely full at Banker's Life, and
yeah, because it was Indiana.
That was the game where they thought he had COVID.
Don't bring that up.
Yeah, that was 2020.
Yeah, that was some weird times. Now
crazy times.
That was some weird times.
And we didn't send you, Rob,
when the sports world shut down that day, March 11th.
They kept the Nebraska media guys there like locked.
Yeah, I didn't go because that was on March 11th. My son was born on March 15th.
Ooh.
So I'm glad I did not.
Yeah, you weren't there.
Get locked in a press room.
It's just a little disconcerting, is my recollection.
Yes.
All right. When we come back, we're going to take your questions in the mailbag. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett, and making her just awesome entrance into the show today, Abby Barmore for the mailbag. Bring it. What do you got today, Abby, in the mailbag?
Man. Okay.
What an entrance.
They're always great, aren't they? Okay, our first one. Assuming Nebraska doesn't get another defensive lineman and goes into fall camp with what they have, who starts?
Good. I mean, I think you got to start with Ty Robinson, Stephon Wynn, Nash Hutmacher. And I know there's a question about Blaze Gunnerson. Does he project down there, or is he going to be out in the space? And that's a great question because we don't know how this is all going to look. But if I was just going to pick three, I would go Ty, Nash,
and Stephon
Wynn probably.
Okay, and Raquan Buckley in that.
Elijah Judy.
I would put Elijah Judy ahead of Raquan Buckley. Yeah, I would too. What are we missing? Who are we missing, Rob?
Freshman after that.
Okay.
You're looking at Vincent Carroll Jackson, Riley Van Poppel, Cameron Lenhart, and Lefotu.
They need another body, is my
I
opinion.
think that's going to be priority number one when this next round of portal action gets underway post-spring.
Yeah.
They got to get some veteran presence.
Next round is mid-April.
And Lenhart is here, 6'3", 250. So where does he kind of factor in? He played at IMG Academy, which is a high-level program. So he might be at least potentially a guy that could play more than 4 games.
Sure.
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
And then we don't really know how they're going to, like some of these guys, is MJ Sherman a true linebacker or is he an edge guy? Don't know that. I don't know that. Do you?
No, I don't.
And we really won't know that until the coaches get a chance to kind of try some of these guys out. So there's a lot of questions like with Gunnerson and Jamari Butlers and those guys. How do they get used in the scheme?
Yeah, it'd be wonderful if we could see spring practice. I doubt we will.
We'll probably get some.
I hope so.
All right, Coach
Maybe
Rule, if you're
open
listening,
practice.
Steve Sipple's asking, can we get
7 practices?
give us the scrimmages. That's all I ask for.
There you go.
Not the spring game, the 2 scrimmages.
There you go.
You get 2 scrimmage dates. Give us those scrimmages. If you're going to let the high school coaches watch one, let the media watch.
Yeah, it would be helpful. I mean,
Sure
there'd be a lot less speculation, a lot fewer reporters going to anonymous sources, and
Otherwise, you'll
going to
have
the
like
message board.
assistant coaches from like Battle Creek High School doing practice breakdowns on message boards.
Which those are
Which
fantastic.
they're great. I love them. we get good ones every year, but
we do.
It's hard to trace where that info is coming from. So let the media do it and give us a view of just a scrimmage or two. What do you got next, Abby?
Does Daniel Kalen from Bellevue West have a committable offer? And what happens if, we know that Dylan Raiola is the number 1 quarterback on the 2024 list for Nebraska, but what happens if he wants to commit?
Right now, Daniel Kalen would not be able to commit to Nebraska because of the Raiola situation. So you hate to use this analogy, but he's kind of like your backup prom date. It's like you're kind of holding out.
It's cold
because you've got the hottest girl in school ready to go with you, but you don't know.
Right.
She's checking out you.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess you go ahead. Just stop with the
Sipple, the quarterback. She's checking out. She's got 3 options.
Yeah.
And you're kind of waiting, but you've got another really, really good looking girl that will go with you.
Right.
That's
full
Daniel
go into
Kalen.
this, aren't you?
Still going with it.
No, you're right, Sean. And that is
it's a cruel analogy, but it's that's kind of how it is. Like he's there. And they know he's there, but Kalen's got Colorado.
Okay.
He's got Michigan State. He's got Virginia. He's got 15 Power 5 offers.
Nice. He's not in a bad position.
He's a borderline high 3-star quarterback.
Okay.
Raiola is a 5-star. Big difference.
You got any sense like what his timetable is? Like, is he going to be a guy?
Kalen?
Yeah. Like how long does Nebraska have to let that play out while they wait for Raiola to figure out his situation?
So I've been with Daniel twice this month now. And Abby was with him too as well on Sunday. And from my read and talking to his coach, Mike Huffman, they have advised him, if you see something that you like in March, you got to commit because the spots go, they fill quick. You can't sit around and dance and wait. If
you got to get interested.
If you go to Colorado and like it and they offer it to you, you got to take it. If you go to Miami, he's got Miami, he's got Virginia, North Carolina, Minnesota, Michigan State, Missouri. He's got a really good group of Power 5s. He doesn't have the Ohio State, the Alabama, like those, but I would say like the middle tier Power 5. He's got a lot of them right now.
Question. So you're a Nebraska coach, Matt Rule, Marcus Satterfield. you got to get a handle on where this is all going. You can't really get left out, can you? Or can you?
And
You get left without Kalen and without Raiola and be okay. They got a bunch of guys.
the portal,
they got 6
the
scholars.
portal
They got
really. I mean,
yeah.
you can get Jeff Sims in the portal. I mean, you can always find a guy.
Buffer zone.
I know it was hard. Kalen really likes Nebraska and the new staff, but the day they go see him, the next day, then 9 Nebraska coaches went to see Raiola. And that was hard. I mean, if you're a kid, 17-year-old kid, 16-year-old kid, and you think it like, man, they really want me. And then the next day, like 9 coaches went to go see Raiola.
Although he's smart enough to understand number 1 player in the country.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, those kids are pretty savvy.
Really
savvy.
What do you got next?
The 1890 initiative announced today that they're going to be working with the baseball team. Is this common for the Big Ten schools, and how is this going to help Nebraska to their advantage?
It will help in that, it's going to kick into gear fast. They want to have players benefiting financially this summer. So it's going to move quickly. The financial commitment is strong. I don't know in the Big Ten. I don't know who knows that. Which teams in the Big Ten benefit from this? In the SEC it's happening, right? I don't know about the Big Ten.
The thing about baseball, like if you even just had a pool of $250,000 for NIL, that would go a long way. Where in football, that's kind of like
chicken scratch.
That's like just your not even the appetizer at the restaurant. It's maybe
you're right. $250,000 would go a long way. And you're going to see 1890 branch too. You're going to see some other sports heavily involved. Women's basketball, bowling. I think there's a deal in place for the bowling team. The
wrestling or no
team.
wrestling?
I've never heard that. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, it's in basketball continues, Robin, to have their own collective operated by Ralph Kastner. And they kind of do their own thing.
They do their own thing.
And it's a different.
They do their own thing, but they do work with 1890 to a certain degree. There is some collaboration. There's help. But the bottom line is the men's basketball team has its own separate collective. The women's team, what I'm hearing, will be working with 1890 quickly. In the coming months.
But when you compare it to Creighton for basketball, it's not even close. No. Like Creighton's basketball collective,
it's not.
Really?
It's not.
Every player gets like even the walk-ons get like 25,000.
Yeah,
and they get the option of a car, an apartment, and they can have it taken off. I've heard a lot of Baylor Shireman's NIL payment from Creighton was hundreds of thousands of dollars.
It was substantially more than what Nebraska was able to offer. I don't know the specifics on numbers, so I'm not going to say them, but it was substantial.
Hundreds of thousands.
To where, like, if you are comparing the offers yourself, like, it's not even a question.
Wow.
Like, if you're just looking at the deals overall. But, I don't know. Like, I wonder what the future of that with Nebraska's basketball's NIL collective situation, if maybe they eventually move towards joining the two or one of the two, bigger entities as opposed to having kind of their little offshot.
I don't know.
Situation.
Yeah, a lot of it, do the Peds want to be involved with basketball and football both? There's other elements there that we don't know. Is it too much? Is it different groups of boosters? There's a lot of,
because I don't know, but I'll tell you something. Rob, you mentioned Shireman like that. You just cannot afford to have your NIL operation, if that was a case, be the impetus to losing a player like that. You better be fortified in your NFL operation to put yourself in position to get that player. You keep losing those players, you keep finishing in the bottom half of the Big Ten. That's the way it works.
You just go this past offseason with the high-level transfer guys they were going after. You can't compete with Kentucky. You can't compete with Creighton right now with guys that they lost players to. And then obviously the Keontae Johnson situation was different, but like you look at Antonio Reeves at Kentucky, Baylor Shireman at Creighton, or Johnson at Kansas State. You put any one of those guys on this team right now, difference maker. It makes the team different. It puts them into a different category amongst the rest of the Big Ten.
Boy, that's a reality. That is some college
right now.
basketball.
Nebraska cannot compete.
That is college sports reality now.
It really is.
Yeah, and that probably is what separates the basketball schools from the wannabes. Like in Nebraska, I wouldn't say is a wannabe, but they're not a basketball school.
And I'm not acting like they're just like working with pennies right now, but like when you want to compare it to basketball schools, Nebraska's got a long way to go.
The Creighton within the Big East might have the best or some of the best NIL, and the Big East is a great basketball league.
Yeah. mean, that's Omaha. I mean, they're Omaha's team.
They got a law school, a medical school,
Mhm.
dentist school.
Yep.
They got a lot of boosters.
Got to wonder if
There's a lot of.
Nebraska-
Most places say what is. There's a lot of money in Omaha.
Yeah, would Nebraska be better served to have a more presence in Omaha? Nebraska basketball,
Yes, that's the answer.
Like playing a game there.
playing more neutral site games, doing certain events up in Omaha, like just having a bigger presence to where it's not just Creighton owns
Mhm.
Omaha, Nebraska has to work with everything else.
All right, time for 2 more. We got to go quick on this one though. What do you got, Abby?
Okay, which Husker football player from the 2022 season was your biggest surprise?
Hmm.
I said Malcolm Hartstug earlier
good
this
one.
week.
That's a good one.
I wasn't really expecting him to even play, let alone start, let alone be an effective player. And guys, I mean, Casey Thompson and Trey Palmer, I mean, I knew they'd make an impact, but I think they made more impact than I expected they were going to.
Yeah. Colton Feast was for me. I mean, obviously Hartzog's the perfect answer, but like just I knew he was going to play. For him to be a starter and basically lock down a spot by the end of the year to where he was one of their better defensive linemen, just how good he was surprising to me.
The only reason I don't say Colton is because Chenander told me he's good in the spring.
But when you compare him to like Wynn
Eric
came
Smith?
in here, big Alabama guy, and
Drew.
Devin Drew, like it just seemed like he was in that next level.
You know what? I know we got to move quickly, but Hartzog is the obvious answer. The next one to me is obvious too. It's Palmer. I did not think Palmer would put up 71 catches for 1,049
I mean,
yards.
people kind of debated me last spring when I said he's the clear-cut number 1 receiver.
Well, now again, he could be clear cut, but still putting up those numbers. Those numbers are way bigger than Samori Toure.
And he was
The
burning.
best season a receiver at Nebraska's ever had.
Right. I did not see that.
I mean, he was burning good defenses.
yeah.
I mean, look at Iowa's defense.
Yeah.
I mean, he made them look like they were playing in sand.
They didn't have Cooper DeJean.
All right, David.
David.
I'm just kidding. Our former.
We're running long, shall we get?
All right, what do you got? What do you got to close us out with, Abby?
Okay, what are your Super Bowl predictions? Who you got?
Oh, love Philly.
Come on now. I mean, Chiefs.
Love Philly.
Boo.
Yeah.
Love Philly.
I can't. I don't know. It's like back in 2018 when it
Sean.
was Patriots, Eagles. Like there's no winners. America loses either way. But
Wow.
I'll go Chiefs just because I hate the Eagles.
Hate the Eagles.
The Chiefs still kind of have taken on this like
They're
New
the
England
new
vibe.
Patriots.
Like people don't like they don't like the Chiefs. And I don't get it.
So what happens when you're good for that long?
The matchup that really is interesting to me is the pass rushes on both sides. I mean, Philly has a ferocious pass rush.
Mhm.
Chiefs aren't that far behind. Chris Jones. Now, the matchup I really watch: Chris Jones versus Lane Johnson. Chris Jones is, I mean, that's as good a pass rusher as you see in the NFL. And the Chiefs move him all around. When he's matched on Lane Johnson's had groin problems, had an adductor injury, groin injury. He's still a little bit. I mean, I've read his comments this week. He's still like a little bit unsure. I'll tell you what, you can't be unsure with Chris Jones coming at you.
Mhm.
So I'd watch that. If you know what, I'd watch the early series because what you see the Chiefs do, if Chris Jones has a matchup that he's winning, they just keep him there. Now they'll move him around if he's not winning all the time, but if he's beating Lane Johnson continually, they'll keep him there.
And what about Mahomes? Will he be able to scamper for those 6-7 yard runs?
I don't
I'm
know.
not talking like 30-yard runs, but those like 3rd and 7 type runs he gets.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah, high ankle. I don't know what. I doubt it'll be 100%.
Yeah. What makes him so good is his ability to improv and
Mhm.
run around in the pocket. It's not just the scrambles. It's moving around in the pocket, buying time, letting Travis Kelce just find the hole in the zone, and boom, there's a 30-yard
For
completion.
sure, Rob. I agree with you. Except I thought that last game when against the Bengals, when he was a little restricted, I like the kind of the controlled Mahomes where he doesn't. He's just kind of a pocket guy, but he makes good decisions, and he doesn't improvise that much. I get what you're saying, but I kind of like that picture.
He's a great quarterback when he's limited to the pocket. He's a generational quarterback when he can improvise.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
When we come back, we'll close the show. We'll
Okay,
talk
Chris
about
Mortensen.
Brian Ferentz's new contract at Iowa and more. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. Final segment here of the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett. We're talking national Big Ten storylines, and I want to lead with this discussion, gentlemen, as we close the show. Brian Ferentz was giving a $50,000 per year pay reduction by Iowa. He'll make $800,000 instead of $850,000.
Could be just 1 year. Could just be one
Just-
year.
Well, yeah, there's triggers on the deal.
Right.
kind of like Scott Frost. I mean, Scott Frost went from $5 to $4 million with triggers that he obviously never got a chance to fire off. He was let go after Georgia Southern, but this has caused a lot of debate. Number one, do you think Brian Ferentz should have been reduced more? Would it even have mattered? I think people would have been mad no matter what. I just think there's this, it's the coach's son, nepotism. He's kind of been a lightning rod target for Iowa. So I don't know no matter what they did to his contract, and I joked on your show, Sip, outside of publicly tarring and feathering Brian Ferentz, I'm not sure there would have been anything that would have been people like, yep, that's a fair deal for Brian Ferentz.
I think you're right. Now the discussion is kind of nuanced, though. It really is. Now, what's not nuanced is this. He's been the offensive coordinator since 2017. In that period, their average for national total offense ranking is 107th nationally. 107th is the average. They've never, ever, with Brian Ferentz calling plays, been higher than 87th nationally in total offense.
They don't run a no huddle.
Yeah.
They don't run the quarterback.
Yeah. That is now the other side of that, though, is Brian Ferentz and Kirk Ferentz would give you the middle finger and say, okay, Nebraska media, we have not during that period won fewer than 8 games. And twice we won 10. And during the COVID year, we went 6-2 and won our final 6. How did you do? I mean, it's almost fascinating that they've won that amount of games with a horrible offense. It's almost like they're saying, we don't need an offense. We'll win with special teams and defense. What makes it even more stunning to me is think about how well they play defensively and the opportunity they give their offense repeatedly.
Yeah.
Their offense is always in good, a lot of time in good, not always.
Other than against Nebraska.
A lot of times and they're in good field position. They get the ball often.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I don't know. It's a really odd situation.
Yeah. I mean, despite all of that help from defense and special teams, they still averaged less than 18 points per game.
17.9.
Yeah. And so, for them to reach that benchmark, that's 10 more points a game than what they scored last year, which was historically bad. And since Brian Ferentz took over as OC in 2017, I was never ranked higher than 86th in total offense. Right. Last year they were 129th.
Right. They've like I said, Rob, they've had an average of 107th nationally in total offense. This year it was mainly an offensive line issue. Now Sean's going to say quarterback. I'm going to say offensive line. They didn't have an Iowa offensive line this year.
Well, and Petrus for 3 years, I think the status size is pretty good that he wasn't a great Iowa quarterback.
No, he's not.
You look at the
he's not.
Other 2 guys they had before him, they were NFL quarterbacks. I mean, it was a significant drop off.
But how much of that is because of a faulty offensive line, though? We've been through this discussion at Nebraska plenty. I mean, how much of Adrian's struggles was because they just weren't very good up front?
I mean, they've had multiple draft picks off that offensive line.
Not this year.
Not this year.
No, their offensive line was substandard.
But this year wasn't like a total aberration either. Like
they weren't very good.
It's been 6 years now of below average offense, and most recently historically bad offensive play.
See, here's what Kirk is thinking. I have to think this. So yeah, Brian's not, his unit's not producing, but offensive line substandard. We didn't have the quarterback we wanted, and they were just beset by injuries at receiver. So they were playing Sam Laporta, their tight end, at receiver a lot. And in fact, they were beset by injury at quarterback. I mean, Laporta was taking snaps during the bowl preparation as a quarterback. So I think the Ferentzes are their line of thinking is we just didn't have the guys we need.
Well, and Kirk is untouchable in that sense too. Like
Kirk is untouchable.
I mean, his contract carries so much weight on it. They can't fire him unless it was for cause for the previous things that they were trying to go after. And that's kind of
hard to fire him. You're right.
But technically Brian reports to the AD because of the nepotism laws in the state of Iowa, Gary Barta. So Gary Barta is his boss, not Kirk Ferentz. But is Gary Barta going to really ruffle feathers with Kirk Ferentz?
Right. Yeah. If he fires his
son.
We
saw like at Miami, they wanted Mark Richt to fire his son, and Mark Richt stepped down. Remember that?
Yeah. I think there were other reasons though. Sean's health wasn't good.
But I mean, they wanted to make him let go of his son, and then
I don't know if that was an impetus. But anyway, yeah, it's a really awkward situation at Iowa. That's it. Except
They had a decent year of all. I mean, it wasn't like
they've always had a decent year.
And that's the number one point that Ferentz and Barta and all those guys make is, yeah, I know our offense has been bad. We're still winning 8 games.
Yeah.
You know,
Or 10. They've twice
10.
won 10.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, for what the expectations clearly are, I mean, they want them to win 7 games next year. That's in the amended contract with Brian Ferentz. Like, if that's your bar, Iowa has achieved that bar and then some every year under Brian Ferentz. So
yeah, 2 10-win seasons with Ferentz, Brian calling the plays.
you get what you ask for, I guess.
But, you know, when you don't run your quarterback either and you don't run a no huddle, you're going to run less plays per game. So, like Iowa, the way they run offense, it's not geared to be like an elite yards or points system. They limit the plays, the points. The style they play doesn't really allow you to have a statistically like top 50.
Well,
offense.
now here's the interesting part of that conversation, Sean. If you watch the game against Nebraska, they didn't play Iowa style. They were doing whatever it took to move the ball in that game. They threw out the Iowa style. Because they weren't running. Think about it. They weren't running just zone left, zone right, play action. They were doing whatever they could. They're throwing screens to the tight end. I mean, they just kind of went to doing whatever they possibly could to move the ball. It wasn't Iowa.
What's funny is we barely could watch that game because we were so busy worrying about the Matt Rule stuff the next morning.
It was really challenging. It was. Here in Nebraska was winning this game where you were sort of startled, right? And you couldn't – I wanted to pay close attention to it, but it was kind of challenging.
It's like you couldn't even get into the game because of knowing what the next morning was going to bring. And it did. The next morning delivered everything and more. I mean, we drove through the night and it was a freaking grind to drive through Western Iowa at like 2 a.m. to get back for Matt Rule to be on TV and everything that happened the next morning. But Trey Palmer declared, and then 2 days later, the Mickey Joseph situation happened. I mean, it was, you just go back to that period in time.
What a time
from the Iowa City.
Yeah. You were a trooper too. You were driving, you were singing Nicki Minaj song.
Whatever it takes, baby. Hey, and we had that great pizza.
The pizza was fabulous. You're right. It was fabulous.
Western Iowa, though, late at night. That I mean, it gets pretty hairy.
Nicki Minaj.
All right. Well,
yeah, Minaj.
Gentlemen, go Chiefs. Sipple's cheering for the Eagles. Robin's got the Chiefs.
I'm gonna have my Rob Lowe NFL hat on. I just hope everybody has a good time.
You're Rob Lowe.
What is that?
Just like the
picture
shield.
of him with a game where he's just wearing an NFL hat at an NFL game. Just rooting for a good time.
All right. Well,
rooting for my prop bets. That's what I'm going to be rooting for.
Rob will have full coverage of Nebraska basketball this weekend, and we're a week away from Nebraska baseball opening the season. So make sure you check out HuskerOnline.com. We will keep you up to date with all of the latest.